Hello everyone. Welcome back to another video of Let's Solve Tactics series. So I have a bit of a limited time at my hands today. I have around 30 minutes after which I have to go do something. So let's see how far I can take it. Also, the last video went pretty long, so I'll try to keep it short today. Okay, so black to play. Go ahead if you would like to pause your video. White has just captured the pawn on b7 with his queen. So yeah, the first thing I notice is the queen on b7 looks like it has come very deep in the black territory, and it may be possible to trap it. So I'm gonna start looking at that. But also I do notice that the knight on c6 is hanging with check. So queen takes c6 check is a threat. The knight has some possibilities. Knight to a5, trying to trap the queen, looks interesting. Let's start by looking at that. So knight to a5. What does white do? Uh, the white queen. I don't think the white queen has any squares to go to, since the knight is covering the b3 square and all other retreat squares are covered by black. So white probably has to try to complicate it somehow, or they may give up their queen for a rook. But I don't see what white can do, since both sides are very underdeveloped. All the pieces are mostly sitting on their original squares. So I'm going to go ahead and play knight to a5. And we get the queen. Let's keep going. Okay, white to play. Go ahead if you would like to pause. Okay, so the king position is the first thing I notice. The fact that I have rook to g3 check available, and the queen could also join in on f7 maybe. Okay. Any other ideas? I have a pawn on d6 which could provide some threats. Someday some d7 check, not check, sorry, pawn to d7. The knight is attacked twice, but because my queen is in front of the rook, I really cannot take it. Also, his queen on b2 could be a bit short of squares, possibly. Okay, but I'm going to start looking at rook g3 check. So rook g3 check. Now the king can go to h6, h7, h8, or f8. So let's eliminate some easy ones first. So if the king goes to f8, rook to g8 is mate, so that's that. And if the king goes to f7, there is queen f7 check followed by a mate on g7, so that also doesn't work. If the king goes to h6, now what do I do? Does queen f7 still work? So queen f7, the most forcing follow-up, I think. Threatening mate on g7 or g6. If black goes rook to g8, I think I can take on f6 and king to h7 then, and I should be doing okay there. I think I should be able to win actually. So other than rook to g3 check, any other moves in the beginning? Rook to b3 or nothing else with the queen. Rook to b3 doesn't work because he takes with the knight. I think I'm gonna start with rook g3 check. So now the question is, do we play queen f7? I also just am noticing that queen f7 after this particular reply threatens two different checkmates. I'm threatening queen to g7 mate and also queen takes h5 mate, and I'm certain both cannot be defended, so this has to be correct. Okay, so he defends against actually both, but so now I have to be accurate. Okay, so queen takes h5 check, rook h7, that is the point. And queen takes f6 check, king h7, queen g6 check, king h8, Hmm. There I have queen h6 check, rook h7, and queen takes f6 check, forcing rook g7 and queen takes uh, g7. So uh, I was looking at this actually. So queen takes h5. No, sorry, I confused myself. Okay, what was I looking at? Let's look again. So queen takes f6 right here. Queen takes f6 check will force king to h7. And yeah, that's how I started. Okay, so queen takes f6 check. Now king to h7. Queen g6 check. He has to go back to h8. And now I have queen h6 check, forcing rook to h7. And finally, queen f6 check, forcing rook to g7. And then I can checkmate him by capturing his rook on g7. Okay, let's go ahead and play that. Okay, that is correct. Let's keep going. Okay, white to play. Go ahead if you would like to pause your video. Okay, so the material in this one is I am down a piece, uh, but I can capture the knight, possibly with 8x b6, but that will lead to bad things for me after rook to a1 check. So I actually get mated there. So 8x b6 is not possible thanks to this rook. So I can also take the rook, of course. So knight takes a6, and not sure what black does there. So black actually can try knight to c4, forking my queen on e5 and the rook on b2. And I do not have a way to defend both. Meaning my queen cannot. Actually, no, I take that back. I can go to e2, queen e2, and defend. So that's what I'm looking at now. Quickly seeing if there is anything else of interest. I don't think rook takes b6 should be considered because he just takes back. Actually, that might be considered. So if rook takes b6, if he takes back with the pawn, I can take his rook. And now there is no more knight forks because I eliminated the knight first. But do I really need to do that? Okay, so I think rook takes knight and knight takes rook. These are my two candidates, I would think. So knight takes rook is the most natural, and knight c4 should be the reply. I don't know what else he does. Something like queen a3 by black can be met by uh, rook b1, and I should be okay. Knight c4, queen e2, knight takes b2, queen takes b2. So I win a rook and then I lose an exchange. So overall, I win a knight in that sequence. Uh, but I can also win that knight maybe directly by going rook takes b6. If he takes with the rook, I go a takes b6. And if he takes again, then I'm not sure what I do there. I think the knight takes a6 sequence is much more cleaner. That's what I feel. So after knight c4, queen e2, is there something else? Can black try something like queen a3 maybe there? Queen a3 again. I think I have rook b1 at a minimum. I should be okay. Okay, I'm going to go with that. Not 100% sure. Okay, queen a3 right away. So he's not only threatening my rook, but he's also threatening a back rank check with mate. So a move like queen e2 will not be sufficient. I was planning rook b1 here. Let's pause and think if there is something else I could do. Moving the rook anywhere on the second rank means that he will check me on the first rank. I could go rook e2 actually. Rook e2, planning to meet queen a1 with rook e1. So he will probably take on c3 in that case. If I do go if I do go rook b1 and then let's say knight c4, rook b1, knight c4, I could always bring my queen back to e1. Or actually, oh, sorry about that. Rook b1, knight c4 will be bad for black because I play rook b8 check. Yeah, and I'll be winning in that case. So rook b1 looks correct, keeping my rook on the b file. I'm going to go with that. Okay, 6 points. So let's look at the pass percentage on that one. It doesn't show, does it? 44.7%. Okay, so kind of a tough problem. We did well. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so go ahead if you would like to pause. It's white to move. Okay, so I noticed this lineup of rooks on the e file. My two rooks are attacking his rook on e8, which is also defended twice by the queen and the knight. Also, my queen is available. Also, there may be some back rank ideas because his king uh, is sort of boxed in by these 3 pawns. Okay, so looking at queen f5 check actually. So queen f5 check. If he moves the knight to block the check, I take his queen, and that should be clear. So if he blocks with the rook, I take the rook and I win. So he needs to move his king to b8, and in that case I can take his rook on e8 with check, and he's not able to capture back with the knight because then I win his queen. If he takes with the queen, I take the queen. So queen f5 looks like it wins. Yeah. Okay, so he did this, which I didn't consider. Okay, that was actually bad of me. Okay, so now his king is totally cut off. It doesn't have a single square to go to. So I should look for checkmating chances. So looking at rook d1 check, but that allows bishop d6, bringing in more defenders. I could play c5 there. But even in the start position, I'm one piece down, so not sure if that is that good. Any other ideas? What if rook takes e8 here? Rook takes e8 check. If he takes with the queen, then I take his queen with my rook. So that should be good. If he takes with the knight, I still take his queen. So yeah. So rook takes e8, expecting queen takes e8. Again, rook takes e8 check, and then he can take with the king or the knight. And I'm having a queen against rook and bishop, which is also roughly equal actually. Not sure if that is the best. What else can I do here? Rook d3 check, bishop d6. I don't know if that changes anything. So rook takes e8, queen takes e8. Queen takes f6 check doesn't help because he can go bishop e7. I do think taking the rook has to be correct. So take. Now I do think I should take again. Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so you can see a little shaky today, but that is okay. Okay, so black to play. Go ahead if you would like to pause your video. The material here looks roughly equal. Both of us have 3 pieces and 2 rooks. I notice, of course, that the bishop on e3 can be captured by the knight, and the knight on e5 could be a little loose since there is knight takes e5 kind of ideas available. Oops, sorry. I just don't want to make any move by accident. So knight takes d4, sorry, knight takes d4 kind of ideas possible. Uh, Other than that, what else could I do here? Not really sure. So I'm going to make a list of candidates. Hmm. Knight takes e3 has to be considered. Okay. Knight takes d4. I will consider. Not sure if it's going to work. Not seeing what else it could be about. Uh, Either the e5 knight or yeah, really about the e5 knight. The king position is somewhat weak, but I don't know if I can get there. Hmm. So okay, let's start calculating knight takes e3. So knight takes bishop. Um, White pretty much I think has to take back either with the pawn or the queen. So let's say he takes with the pawn. So f takes e3. And in that position, I do have knight takes d4 attacking the queen. And if he takes back, uh, e takes d4. I have queen takes d4 check, forking the king and the knight on d4. And I'll end up winning the knight for 2 pawns. So that actually looks interesting. So what if he, after knight takes e3, he captures with the queen? In that case, I can just take on d4 with my knight, and that hangs the knight on uh, e5, and it also is pinned to the queen. So direct knight takes d4, bishop takes d4 doesn't look like it's working. I'm going to go with this because I think that forking sequence has to be the idea. And now knight takes d4 and check, and we will win the knight next. Okay, interesting problem, that one. Okay, black to play. Go ahead if you would like to pause your video. Okay, so of course the first thing to notice is this lineup of my rook and queen against his g2 pawn, which would lead to mate except for this queen on d5. So if I can distract the queen on d5 somehow, then I could take on g2. So that's one idea. Also, my bishop on e5 is very menacingly placed. So there could be some ideas with either bishop h2 or maybe queen g3 followed by some um, infiltration on the dark squares. Okay, even my knight on d4 is very well placed. So all my pieces are very actively placed. And of course, last but not the least, my queen is hanging thanks to white's last move. Okay. Hmm. So just wondering where to start. So maybe I can start with queen to g3 and see if that leads to anything. That hits the bishop on h7, sorry, d3, I'm sorry, and also threatens queen h2, uh, possibly. So queen g3, let's say he just moves the bishop back. Let's see what I can do there. Bishop to b1, let's say. Now I can try queen h2 check, which will force king f2, and I can bring in another attacker at that point. Rook a to f8 check. That will force king to uh, e3, and then I can bring my queen. No, I cannot bring my queen. Okay. Uh, hmm. It does feel like I'll have something good there. So queen g3, bishop b1, Queen h2, king f2, rook a to f8 check, king e3. What if queen g3 back? He can always run to d2. So I feel like the king might be getting away. Okay. So after queen h2, king f2, what if I just go after material simply with bishop to uh, bishop to g3 check? Then he is forced to go to e3 again. Hmm. He doesn't have too many squares, but not sure how to mate him. I could take on e1, but not clear. Okay. I'm going to look at some other options first. Also, I just missed the obvious. I can take his bishop. What happens there? What if I just take his bishop? Uh, just wondering what white does. Maybe something like rook e5. So queen d3, rook takes e5. If pawn takes e5, queen takes e5, check. King h7, rook f7, check. That is starting to look dangerous. King h6. Queen. Uh, Not sure to be honest, but that definitely looks dangerous after rook takes e5. Hmm. Okay. Any other candidate moves I have? Knight to f3 check. Queen takes f3 would be forced, but that also defends the bishop on d3 and protects the g3 square, so that does not look correct. I really think I probably should calculate queen takes bishop more seriously, because that is the most obvious move, and if I can get away with it, then I'm doing very well. So queen takes bishop, and I think rook takes e5 has to be tried for white. Hmm. I'm not forced to take there. I'm not forced to take the rook, that is. But not sure if I don't, what else do I do? So queen takes d3, rook takes e5, d takes e5, queen takes e5, check. Uh, I could try rook g7. I could try rook g7. Self-pinning. Now, he does have queen takes h7, but then I can bring my queen back, and that should defend. But what if he does something else? So what if queen takes d3, rook takes e5, d takes e5, queen takes e5, check, rook g7, rook f7? Then again, I think at a minimum, I could bring my queen back to g6, holding my rook. I should be okay, I think. Okay, is queen g3 better for some reason? it wasn't clear to me if I am winning for sure rather than taking the piece. I'm going to take the piece and let's see. Okay, so we are going down the line that I predicted. So I was planning to take, he takes rook g7, queen takes h5. Just checking to see if there are any mistakes. But I think I'm holding. I'm gonna play that. Okay. Now I do feel that I have to self-pin, and that is correct. Okay. Let's look at the pass percentage on that one. 24%. So a tough problem, that one. Okay. I took 8 minutes. So okay. Let's keep going. Okay. Go ahead if you would like to pause. It is white to play. Okay. So my rook is attacking the bishop, which is protected by the knight. So the bishop could be a target of some sort. Also, there is a lineup of his rook with his king, which could be interesting. Sorry. What else? The material is probably roughly equal. Yeah. It looks equal. Okay. So in terms of candidates, bishop g5 check actually could be considered. Um, that may be the win. Also, rook takes c5 has to be considered. Maybe bishop e5 check, although I don't know if that's really working. So I'm going to start with bishop g5 check. So the point is to skewer the king and the rook. And if the king moves to g6 or f7, I take his rook with my bishop and I'll be winning an exchange. So that, but the point is, if he goes knight takes g5, then I take the knight with check first. So h takes g5. And once the king moves, let's say king to e6, then I take this bishop that has been left loose. So I'm going to go with bishop g5. Take, take, and now I take the bishop. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, white to play. Go ahead if you would like to pause your video. An endgame of some kind where I have a lot of hanging pieces. The material is equal. Yeah, okay. So I could, of course, the most obvious move is to take his knight. So bishop takes d5 check. But there may be some other possibilities. There is this, of course, the lineup of my rook and his king and my knight. So that is the most interesting feature of this position. Also, his king is very short of squares. So wondering if I can take advantage of that somehow. The king literally has nowhere to go actually. So maybe some checkmating chances. Not sure. Okay, so in terms of candidates, of course, bishop takes knight is one, and other discoveries with the bishop, everything becomes a candidate. So maybe bishop to a4, bishop to b5, bishop to e8, even bishop to d7 I should look at. Other moves with the rook, I don't think so, because my bishop and knight both are hanging. And he's also threatening some kind of rook b1. So knight moves, maybe knight to d4 could be considered, but again, doesn't seem right. I feel like this bishop has to move and deliver a check. So the question is where. Now, as I think about that, I feel, I mean, I don't really know. Okay, so let's look at some stuff. Okay, so let's say bishop to b5 check. Now, the king still is not able to go anywhere, so he has to block that check. So he can block with his rook or knight. If he blocks with his rook, so rook to b6, Not sure what I have there. Yeah, really not seeing what I have there. Maybe I do have something. So bishop b5, rook b6. If I take rook takes b6, knight takes b6, my knight is hanging on uh, e6, and yeah, that doesn't look good. Okay, so maybe bishop to b7, trying to block his rook. Bishop to b7 check. Still defending my knight with my rook. Now he's in check, but he can go to uh, d7, and that seems like the so only options he will have after bishop to b7 is knight to b6 or king to d7. So if knight to b6, I can take the knight, and then again he has to go to d7, and I'm doing well because I have an extra piece. So bishop b7, king d7, I can take the knight with the bishop and hold on to my knight as well. So that looks correct. Maybe there are some other moves. Bishop to e8. I think all of these other discoveries can be met by rook b6, which I don't like. So bishop to b7 check, I'm going to go with. Okay, that is correct. And actually, I am out of time. So this time I cannot reach all the way to 1700, but I will end the video here. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next time when I try to reach 1700. Okay, bye guys.